And a base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Tuesday morning, and we got Dylan Butler joining us at 9:30 to talk MLS and the weekend that was. I'm still thoroughly enthralled by the Tate Say morning show with penalties. That is just ridiculous when they get into the dizzy penalty portion of it. Because what I'm finding is that the more dizzy the person is, but can still kind of keep their feet, because some of them have not. One of them actually almost took out half the set by falling over to the side, which was great. The dizzier they are approaching the penalty, the harder it is for the goalkeeper to have any semblance of a clue where they're going to go.
True.
Because they don't really know where they're going to go. And the more they fall down and stumble and stab at the ball and hit it with their pinky toe and all that, the goalkeeper's like, what do I do with this? It's hilarious. Though usually the ones that look the worst are the ones that end up finding the back of the net on this thing. I want to bring this to American television one day. That's my ultimate goal in life. Lots of things to get into today. We are going to start with all the conversation out of Europe because the pearls are being clutched. The people are freaking out. The Champions League reform is being discussed. And it looks like the idea of legacy spots, which was essentially kind of Super League-ish without being Super League-ish, but really was Super League-ish. Looks like that's not going to happen. And it looks like what is going to happen is the extra 2 spots are going to be handed out to a country based off the Europe-wide coefficient. And you'll be limited to 5 Champions League spots from a country. So the big 6 is not all getting in from England. It's only going to be 1 bonus spot per country, and 2 bonus spots will go in. Now, it is still going to be the Swiss model with 10 games and all of that, and England is all worked up about it because it might threaten the Gummy Bear Cup's existence. Oh no, not the Gummy Bear Cup. Don't come for the Gummy Bear Cup. I mean, I don't know. Like, you were going to add more games because cash. We know how that works. You got to do some way to make that work. So you're going to add more games. You're going to add more teams. Again, money. It's not hard to follow this. This is better than the other. So if you have a really good season in the Europa Conference League, the Europa League, the Champions League the previous year, your country does well. You get Cali Thistle that gets in somehow out of Scotland, and they pull off a couple upsets in the Conference League early rounds, and that helps Scotland get a bonus spot if they're one of the best coefficients. Jarrett, you'd be happy.
I'd be very tickled.
They won't finish top 2 in coefficient. That would be madness.
They won't finish top 2 in coefficient. That's no, it's not 1974 anymore. Let's just move on with life.
Hilarious, but no. So it looks like that's the way it's going to go. We knew that the games were coming. The 10-game Swiss model thing with a schedule, we knew that was coming, and at least we did. I don't know if everybody does. I think people are reacting to it like, what is this? It's been on the books for like a year. So come on. This is better than having clubs basically have like a get out of jail free card in their back pocket because they've historically been good. I do like this better than that, at least.
I mean, and Jared, I'll let you.
No, go ahead.
It's just in a sec. It's just whatever happened to just doing things on merit. I know that cash and having big names and things like that.
That's essentially what they're doing, John.
And that's what I would like. It's like, look, you do well, you get in. You don't do well, and you're a big name. We still think that you should get in.
John, you've got 2 more spots coming in. You can't give all of the big 5 an extra spot, so you've got to divvy it up somehow and allow it to change a little bit from year to year. This is the best way to do it in that, because if your country did well the previous year, then the next best team that wasn't getting in gets in. So what are you arguing about?
No, it's just my biggest issue with it just has to do with just because you're a big name doesn't mean that you should.
That's not what's happening, John. John, that's not what's happening now. That's been ruled. That's been struck down. We're not doing that.
And that's what I'm agreeing with. I'm circling back to that point. I'm agreeing with
sound
that
like
notion.
You're disagreeing. Okay.
Oh no. I want the variety of competition. I don't want the same names in just because you were average and okay. I know. It's just look. Just because you're a big name and you're average doesn't mean that you should get a get out of jail free card and hop back into a tournament.
Now hold on. Now it wouldn't have been like that either. It wouldn't have been quite that simple. Let's not make things up out of thin air here, please. It's not going to be, you got relegated from the Premier League, but you were good in previous years, so you get into the Champions League the next year. No, that's not how that was even going to work. But this is better than club past history getting in over somebody else, in my opinion. This is, your country, and I think it makes the Europa League and the Conference League a little more important, Jarrett. And I don't hate that. It makes you want a bonus spot in the competition the next year. Okay, hey, your 6th and 7th place teams that are playing the Conference League, you might want to take it seriously and not go lose to Bodo Glimt.
Yeah,
although Roma did fix that.
Yeah, they did. Celtic did not, however.
Celtic did not. No, they didn't.
They did not at all. They got trucked. I want more importance on those tournaments, and I'm happy that we get. I was very happy that CBS does the Golazo show for that as well. I think I was nervous at first that when they did the Golazo show, it was going to be centric upon Champions League only, and that Europa League or Europa Conference League might kind of get the redheaded stepchild treatment. I'm glad that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
Because those tournaments are a delight. You get more teams. It's not one of the situations where Champions League is the marquee and the rest of it's just kind of a sloppy mess. I mean, yeah, you might get sloppy games, but you can get sloppy games in Champions League.
Yes, they happen.
They happen a lot, especially in the group stages. But you also get some chaotically fun games with teams that otherwise wouldn't be making European tournaments, who might play some wide-ass open styles. Hello, Bodo Glimt. That can go up and punch above their weight for a bit before they get brought back down. It's a lot of fun. We love to see it in Champions League and I know it's the idea of like you have all the blue bloods, and Ajax is in an interesting spot where they make the run a couple years ago because they have the history, but they're not considered to be in that elite category anymore because now money runs the whole damn sport in Europe. You get more of these teams making these runs where you can just enjoy what they're doing. Hell, enjoying what Rangers is doing.
I would like to make a point of clarification. Money rules the game everywhere. There's just more of it in Europe.
This is true, but we're talking about Europe right now, which is why I brought it that way.
You said money
that's a good clarification.
Yes, that's why I clarified, because it runs it everywhere. It's just it might be small bucks in some places.
Yeah. But even what Rangers is doing in the in Europa League, it's been an outstandingly fun run. Jose Mourinho doing what he's done at Roma, and the man just breaking down into tears after that. This guy who is almost a caricature of himself at this point in the eyes of many people, who's gone from being this brilliant, almost Hannibal-like tactician to kind of being a caricature, to a guy who's now, in tears on the sideline after leading Roma or guiding Roma to Europa Conference League final. And you see how much it means to him. We don't get those stories without these tournaments being taken seriously by certain people. And look, we had this conversation about the US Open Cup. I mean, if you're not going to take it seriously, woe be unto you. Good luck getting embarrassed by a second division team. It's not the exact same thing, but I hope in Europe that we do see clubs continue to take it seriously. Maybe next time Brendan Rodgers knows the name of the tournament he's going to be in. Maybe clubs look at it and say, hey, this is our opportunity to go, and if we get in this tournament, maybe we get some favorable draws against teams that we feel like we can take on, and we try and balance the schedule and see how things play out, and we keep pushing, and we take our opportunities, and you never know when, your number comes up to be that Cinderella.
Now, a couple of things about where it stands right now. The coefficient situation, just if you're not used to the term, it does determine how many spots you get in these competitions in general. So it's something that's already used. So using it for these extra spots, that makes sense. It would not be for these extra spots. It would not be 5 seasons taken into account. It would be the previous year. So it would be the previous year's performances in Europe that would determine where these extra spots go. And cool. That makes sense. Good with that. Instead of getting 4, you might get 5 if your country did well in all the European competitions the year before. Good with all that. That makes sense. It's all good. Now they have backed down a little bit on the number of games. It's not quite the Swiss model that was originally proposed, which was 10 games against 10 different teams, 5 home, 5 away, as opposed to the 6 they play right now. La Liga, the Premier League, strongly objected to that. The ECA, the European Clubs Association, and UEFA are now proposing 8 games spread out over 10 match weeks. Some leagues did not complain about the number of games. France, for example, they reduced the size of their league from 20 to 18 in Ligue 1 to accommodate more European football for their best teams. And they thought that UEFA would redistribute increased money and it would end up being a net positive for them. Also, the French league is being slightly French right now in terms of this argument about the coefficient and the extra places. They came up with their own proposal that they want the one of the spots in this new format to go to the 5th best league in Europe. Who is the 5th best league in Europe according to the coefficient? That would be France.
Yes.
So they want 4 spots in the new Champions League, and that's their argument, and I don't think anybody's on board with anything the French are proposing right now. So I'm sure there will be plenty more about this, because when you talk about money and number of games and UEFA making money and clubs making money, they're not going to shut up anytime soon. There are meetings today about this. I don't think there is expected to be an actual proposal nailed down, but maybe the guts of it can be determined here. So 8 games instead of 10, which is 2 more than the current 6, and these additional spots being allocated in, I think, a more fair way, good faith way, according to the way that teams get in anyway. So I think it kind of makes sense for everybody involved. Now, England is still worried about their Gummy Bear Cup. The precious Gummy Bear Cup is under threat because of all these extra games. Rick Perry says it's not under threat. He is the chairman of the EFL. He is going to defend the Gummy Bear Cup's honor. And the reporting about all of this, by the way, is very confusing place to place, because in England, they're talking about the minimum of 10 games against 10 different opponents as how Champions League will be set up, which it sounds like it's not. Okay. Perry says, we are realistic. We clearly know 2024 is coming. That's when this is going to change. UEFA doesn't really like League Cups. Well, we are pretty much unique now in terms of major leagues. Well, maybe you shouldn't be. The League Cup has the 2-leg semifinals as well, which just adds more games to it. Alexander Seferin said in 2020 the League Cup should be scrapped to avoid congestion. Perry says he doesn't think the future of the competition is under threat. He says whether, for example, we have to consider single-leg semifinals, whether we have to look at the teams that clubs in Europe field. If discussions around the future of the EFL Cup are part of the broader discussion around redistribution and governance, so be it. But they can't take place in isolation. They have to be part of the total package. Is the Gummy Bear Cup needed, John?
No.
You're anti-Gummy Bear Cup. Are they going to revoke your England card?
They'll probably banish me to the Isle of Wight or something like that. Forced to watch from a remote place with rabbit ears and tinfoil on top of the antenna. They won't give me cable to watch it.
If you had said the Isle of Man, I would have had lots of jokes. I did not take that.
Yeah.
That would have been out of hand.
It could have. No, it's just, while I enjoy it because of the notion like we have here with US Open Cup, where you could have a lower division.
Don't even put the US Open Cup in the Gummy Bear Cup
on the premise of a lower division club upsetting the top division club.
You have that called the FA Cup.
And that's the only romance that's attached to it. I think it's extraneous. I really do. I'm sorry, Rick Perry. I think that it's one too many tournaments that you have in your country, but no, I think it's absolutely extraneous. You don't need it, and I think it should be scrapped.
You have the FA Cup, which has all of the things that you get out of the League Cup, except more importance. Jarrett Scotland has a League Cup. I think France has a League Cup, or at least they have. Maybe they scrapped it. Maybe they're scrapping it. It feels like as the game is expanding, and I know Scotland goes completely bonkers with their League Cup because it's Scotland. Have at it. Feels like you're starting to run out of time for these games. And, we're talking about it here with injuries because we're watching a lot of them play out in front of us. With the number of games being played in other parts of the world, and you're going to get more here too, and you're going to have to manage these things. Player safety is an issue and health is an issue, and there's only so many games you can play in a calendar year without rest.
There is, and how do you balance that is where it gets interesting. Scotland is notorious for that issue because of all of the competitions that they have. You get guys up there, especially because of all their, they have their own little gummy bear cup. It's the Fried Mars Bar Cup.
Yes.
Um,
with a group stage because,
with a group stage. And then if you get a top team like, Rangers this year playing in all those cup competitions, making runs in all of them, plus the league, plus making a deep run in Europe, you're looking at an obscene number of games and an obscene number of miles on legs. How do you get that rest? I mean, you're going to get some of it in the summer, but some of these guys are going to go play international for their countries, and then you're going to jump right back into it because it's a pretty short break, and then you're going to have to start getting ready for Champions League, which won't be as bad this year for them because of the way they've moved up in the coefficient. But for countries that are behind them and for what they used to have to do, you're talking about countries sometimes having to play, somebody's top team who might be in that situation playing 2 or 3 qualifying rounds before they can even get to a playoff. That's, another potentially 6 games on your legs on top of it. It's just brutal.
Yeah, it could possibly be too much. And look in,
and then a World Cup in December.
Yeah, well, it's for a small number, but yes, it's going to add to it. You're going to have to manage this stuff, and managers and clubs are going to have to be very cognizant of it. You do have in the situation, just to be clear, I think France is a little bit different because I don't believe Ligue 1 and the second division are separate as a business entity from the French Federation. I might be wrong on that. The Premier League is separate. The EFL is its own thing versus the FA. Same in Scotland. The League Cup is a revenue generator for the league governing body, and that adds a little complication. So, of course, they don't want to give up money because money rules the game everywhere at all levels. And this is what we're dealing with. So you are going to have to sort some of these things out. And this is where I think from a broader standpoint, FIFA and UEFA need to sit down and create this pathway of what a calendar is supposed to look like. And it does include the international side because there's the talk that was originally being thrown around a 2-year World Cup cycle, which looks like is not going to happen at any point. But there was talk about rearranging the international calendar, which will affect where qualifiers fall, where Nations League falls, where all of those different things fall. And then the cup competitions fall after the league is scheduled around these international breaks. And that's a lot of stuff to juggle. It's going to take more coordination than just yay, nay, Champions League spots and gummy bear cups and blah, 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 blah. We'll see if they can actually do it. My hope is that they do. My expectation is, yeah, right. This is FIFA and UEFA and governing bodies of sport that we're talking about, so I'm not expecting it. I am expecting the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup tonight. We do have Orlando hosting Philadelphia, DC hosting the Red Bulls, Detroit City hosting Lou City, Inter Miami hosting South Georgia Tormenta, Union Omaha hosting Northern Colorado Hailstorm, Sporting Kansas City hosting FC Dallas, and LAFC hosting Portland. What's the game of the night, Jarrett?
Well, this particular soul will be behind Bolt the Ibis and what Tormenta is doing as we watch
Ibis versus Heron battle in Fort Lauderdale.
Yes, and the Ibis will, and especially if they get into a foot race, Bolt will win.
I don't think Miami actually has a mascot.
That's their loss.
It is. I mean, they have the Heron. They should have a Heron mascot. It could go fight the Miami FC mascot.
They already beat Golazo.
Yeah, that's when you should have unveiled the Inter Miami mascot, because he could have hit Golasso with a chair or something.
Just get Golasso out of my nightmares, please.
Yeah, just DDT him. It's all good.
Yeah, I will be invested in the Tormenta game. I hope they continue their run. It's been so much fun, and look, Miami's going to be an interesting battle for them. Just depends on how healthy Miami is coming into it, because Miami lost over the weekend, but Miami, go back and look at the numbers on that game. Miami created chances. They just made the mistake of kicking the ball right to Kalina, which that's not a great decision when you're trying to score goals. Instead of hitting the back of the net, they kept hitting the goalkeeper. The other game I will be watching for my sheer enjoyment of it.
You want an update on Miami? Gonzalo Higuain is available for selection tonight.
So
Robert Taylor, no, you're not. You're not on the roster, Jared. You're actually not available for selection. Robert Taylor, the Finland international, is in the mix. He missed the last match. Marsman out. Aime Mabika out due to injury. That is your Miami update.
The other game I will be watching as my time is coming to a close. I know we're jumping into Dylan's time in just a moment where we go over MLS, which will be joyful for all of us. I am just tickled at the idea of seeing how close we get to fisticuffs between Orlando and Philadelphia.
I vote for 5th minute.
I vote for Oscar Pareja just basically throwing down the gloves, throwing down the stick, and squaring up with Jim Curtin.
Oscar Pareja did in the past offer a tissue to Caleb Porter post-match in a Dallas-Portland match that Caleb Porter did not accept said tissue and was very upset by the gesture. And yes, it nearly sparked some things.
Man, well, if he's gonna be salty towards Caleb Porter, I imagine that it would not be it's not a bridge too far to ask him to be salty towards Jim Curtin, because that just feels natural.
No, it definitely does.
That game could be terrifying. It could be an ugly, ugly, drunken, sloppy mess. Not drunken fun like a late night San Jose game, but more of like a drunken, messy, sloppy, clean yourself up, put some respect on yourself kind of drunken game.
Could be. There will be a goal cast, is what they're calling it. Football Americas, Sebastian Salazar, Hercules Gomez doing this on ESPN Plus starting at 6:30 tonight. 10 games. They're going to have a bunch of guests, 6+ hours live. We'll get into more Open Cup as we go. Jarrett, you joining us again later in the show, or are you leaving?
I am hoping to join you later in the show for more Open Cup discussion, because Open Cup is life. Open Cup is good.
It is. I agree. Well, hopefully we'll talk to you in a little bit.
Sounds good. See you.
Let's welcome in Dylan Butler to the show. What's up, Dylan?
What's up, guys?
Morning.
Not much. Plenty of stuff to talk about. We'll get into MLS in a second. Open Cup is back, round of 32. I asked Jarrett what his game of the night would be. I'll ask you, what is your game of the night that you will be locked in for in Lamar Hunt US Open Cup play?
Well, to be fair, I am working tonight, so I'll be locked in kind of to all of them. So
Fair enough.
I don't like the MLS matchups, right? Like, we see enough of those. So my only option then would be Miami, South Georgia, right? But there's always some craziness. Like, I go back a couple years. You guys remember the Orlando NYCFC nutty Open Cup? This was before the playoff PK round craziness, where the fans like ran to the one side of the field and behind the goal, and so there is madness even between MLS clubs, right? But like we don't have sort of that magic except for that one match with Miami and South Georgia. So I suppose that one would be the one most locked into, because we likely will see, these teams, obviously the MLS teams obviously kind of rotating and using some of their younger guys. So
yeah, Tormenta's been really good in this tournament so far, beating 2 USL championship teams and looking really, you get a sense sometimes when you watch some of these lower division teams, like just the way they play, the way they're set up, like can they go up a level and play with a team that is in a higher league or has a higher budget or whatever you want.
Yeah, for 90 minutes too, right? Like we've seen them go for like maybe 45 or 60, but like across 90, and even too when it gets into, extra time, that's when it becomes hard, I think, for these lower level teams.
Yeah, it's like, do you look organized? Do you look like you can ride out some of those storms? And Tormenta has looked like that to me. They look like they can play above their level a little bit. Orlando, Philly, I'm kind of with Jared. I think that could be some fireworks because we know Philly's going to rotate their squad heavily coming back from LA on the weekend. They're going to play a bunch of their kids, but we know how they're going to play. So it's going to be very
and we know their kids are good, by the way.
Their kids are good, and their kids know the system, and that system can create a lot of friction in a match. And Orlando's a team that at times hasn't handled friction very well. No. So there could be a lot of cards in that one.
Yeah, I think, and I think you and I both did pretty well, right? With the I forgot our counts with the cup sets, right? But we were pretty close. I think in the third round, right?
Yeah, pretty close. It looked like the first day, it's like, oh, they're going to blow this number out of the water. And the second day, there really wasn't many.
Well, considering that, I think I took the over when it came to cup sets, just because of the me being hashtag Team Chaos. That's what I'm always looking for in these kinds of competitions. Yeah, I think that Jim Curtin yesterday said that it was going to be, I think, 5 to 7 that were going to be rotated. Freeze was going to be in net to start things off. And, this way, I think it might even open the door for a little more friction, just because these guys are going to get that opportunity. They're going to want to sit there and impress the boss and say, hey, look, I'm continuing our game plan, and I'm going to be that much more edgy in Orlando. I think that this one could be the chippiest one of the night.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then obviously on what is today? Wednesday, right? You've got more opportunities for cup sets, right? Because that's where more of the lower level teams are taking on the MLS teams. So
yeah, and I mean, we get into the cup sets, and it's always fun. And you've got Richmond hosting Charlotte on Wednesday. You've got Rochester, New York, the remnants of the Raging Rhinos going to New York City. Where is NYC playing that? Do you know?
St. John's, baby. My own Belson Stadium. Okay. The stadium built on top of a parking lot. It's so New York City.
That is very New York City. You got San Antonio going to Houston, and you've got the California United Strikers hosting the LA Galaxy, and maybe one of the wilder matchups in terms of two teams at differing levels. I think that's sold out wherever Cal United Strikers plays. I think they've sold that one out.
They play apparently at Championship Soccer Stadium. So
Championship, that's the name of the stadium.
Yeah, it's where Orange County plays.
Okay, yeah. They might be borrowing it possibly then, allegedly. Gonna be fun. I mean, but this is an important tournament because the winner does go into the Champions League, and as we saw last week, the Champions League maybe has a little bit different feel after Seattle gets their win, huh?
Yeah, man. That's we said right at the end of the show, could it happen? We thought it could, and I think what I was most happy to see was that they did it with an exclamation point, right? There was no question. There was no dodgy officiating. They got a lucky bounce. Like Seattle bossed that match, and they finished it like a champion should. So I think all credit to them. They did so, unfortunately, with at a price with João Paulo. That was a brutal injury that's going to really affect them going forward. But yeah, listen, history was made. Great crowd, right? Everything that went with it. So kudos absolute to Seattle. And now the bar is raised, right? Now the question was, can MLS finally break it? Well, they did. Now, can they sustain that? It's one thing to do it and then not have another champion for the next 6 years, right? Like they've got to sustain this. And I think they will now. I think once you get the first one, I think the playing field is a little more leveled.
And since you mentioned Seattle, let me go into the Western Conference a little bit. Yes, I know that they've been focusing on this run in Champions League, but right now, regardless of what they've been doing outside of league, they've lost 3 in a row. I know they've only played 8 matches, so that only puts them, 2 or 3 behind, depending on who we're talking about here. But right now, 7 points out of their first 8 matches because of the focus with CONCACAF Champions League. When you look at Seattle, I anticipate that, yes, they're going to be in the playoffs, but right now you've got a lot of folks that you've got to climb over. And I know that you've got 7 points to make up just to get into the playoff picture. I think that obviously they're going to be a part of the playoff discussion because we've seen it before, them coming from lane 8. But what do you look at when you're looking at Seattle in the Western Conference? What do you see as they're having to climb this big ladder again?
And they've got to do it again without a guy in João Paulo who you can make an argument, right, was certainly what we spoke about it last year, was an MVP candidate, was one of the best players again this year. And it's a position that we've said a million times with Ilya Sanchez and others, right? Like you don't replace those guys. So that's a major concern going forward, right? For Seattle, they do have good young players, but there's no like for like with him on their roster. So they'll have to make this climb without him. And I'm really curious, and we'll find out, right? But we've always talked about how the Champions League run affects teams, right? Like, and we've seen teams that have reached the final and then their season collapsed. Toronto is a good example, right? So what does it mean for a team that's won now, right? We've never seen that before. So I'm intrigued to kind of see how Seattle manages that. And again, I think if there's any club that can manage it, I think it's them, just because of all the reasons we said why we thought they'd win it, right? But again, that injury is a huge one for them. So I think you could look at other spots on their roster and you could say we could fill that spot. You really can't fit. Maybe with the exception, I would say also with a Rui Diaz, because you have to change a little bit. Maybe you have a Morris play there, but I don't. There isn't a like for like for him. So that's going to be a tough one.
You're going to be asking Ladero and Rusnak to do a lot more in that role. Maybe Christian Roldan comes back into the central midfield as well, and you're going to have to figure out, multiple 8s to try to find a 6 out of it. Right. Is basically where you're at. Some other things from the weekend in MLS. I think we expected Seattle to struggle on the road in Dallas. Dallas is a good team in this league. I think they don't get a lot of respect, but I think the team that gets the least amount of respect for being as strong as they are is Montreal.
Yes. 100%.
Montreal with another win, a dominant win over Orlando as well. It could have been a lot worse than 4-1. They are 6 or 7 straight unbeaten in MLS, and I think it's 8 straight in all competitions because they drew their last CCL game. What a run for the former Impact, who maybe are going to be the Impact again when they do this rebrand. We'll have to wait and see. Is it just because it's Montreal and because they haven't been maybe at the top of the ladder for a little while that they just don't get the respect they deserve?
Yeah, probably, right. It is confounding, unless it's, they're stuck up in Canada, I don't know, like they should get
to watch too.
100%. Right. Absolutely. I haven't been there for one of their matches. Obviously you have. I've been to the city. It's a great city. One of my favorite, to go to. They play an attractive style. They've got Mihailovic right there in the middle, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know why they don't get enough respect. They certainly should. I think the question for them is going to be, can they sustain it, right? Because we liked them last year too, and then they kind of petered out, and then it didn't work out for them late. So they've got to get this across a 30, 4 right game season. So that's the question. But listen, early returns are great. I think they're one of the better stories early on of this season, and huge credit goes to Nancy and the job that he's done. But again, you've got the pieces. I like the job that they've done as well with like their youth as well as their business with Bologna as well. I think that's been a really good partnership. All in the family kind of thing. So, listen, all credit to them. I hope they sustain it, because I think when they're humming and when they're good, like we saw back in the day with Nacho and those guys, and Drogba, it's fun.
I think it's when we were going to Montreal. We were talking, me and Jillian and Kevin Egan. We're talking on the way to the hotel that the Eastern Conference Final with Toronto and Montreal is still maybe the best playoff series in MLS history.
100%. That was amazing. It had everything, right? And that it came with two hated rivals, right? Made it even more fun.
Since you mentioned Toronto, we know that the East is crazy right now, where it's 4 points, I think, from the absolute basement to getting into a playoff spot. You mentioned Toronto. Let me ask about Toronto and New England, two teams that are currently out of the playoff picture. When you look at Toronto, who's now lost 4 in a row, yes, they've been decimated by injuries, and I think they've had to do they've done the bulk emergency call up for the last 2 matches last week, where they called up 4 guys on emergencies, and then you have New England, who's still kind of hiccuping their way through right now. When you look at those 2 big names that are out of the playoff picture in the East, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, John, you said it with the injuries, and it's affected both teams, right? New England, and we've said it here before as well. They don't have the best depth. So when you have injuries to key guys, and they have, right from the back, right up their spine, really, with Turner, and then Farrell as well, right? Up front, you've had those injuries. They don't recover well from that. And Toronto was a team that we didn't love them defensively to begin with. Yeah, and also they've dealt with it. So we do know what's coming for Toronto in the summer. The question,
he's not a defender, though.
He's not a defender.
And Carlos Salcedo has not.
He will not defend.
Yeah, Lorenzo Insigne is not going to fix the back line.
So the question is sort of for them, I'd imagine, can they tread water long enough, figure out some more defensive help, and when they get him, will that be their leaping off moment? And for New England, it's almost the opposite, right? Like, they know they're not going to have Turner for much longer, right? They did make a signing. Will he be the guy? Well, we've got to find out. But yeah, I don't know. And the funny thing, I think, with the East is, you would have maybe last year New England was obviously the Supporters' Shield, but you would have figured maybe one of those teams could have a chance to jump, because you have the Cincinnati factor as like, well, they'll be behind, we don't have to worry about them. And now they've just like screwed everything up, right? Because like they're like winning, you break them up, right? Like now they're above the line, like
3 wins in a row.
Yeah,
2 of them against Toronto, but 3 wins in a row.
Yeah, well, you play who's in front of you, right? That's the awesome thing we said early in the season. So
it's true. The East is wild. I mean, 9 points top to bottom is what separates it. Atlanta's in 7th right now, in the middle, and they're 5 points out of first and 4 points out of last. I mean, what do you want from this thing? You look at teams that have kind of had a little bit of a run of form. You mentioned Cincinnati, NYC, 4 straight without a loss, although the scoreless draw on the weekend wasn't exactly great. It wasn't great conditions at Citi Field either, so a little understandable there. Chicago, we saw them here in Atlanta. It was a very impressive start for Ezra Hendrickson. It has not gone well as of late. It didn't go well in the Open Cup either, where they got bounced by Union Omaha. They have added reinforcements in Jairo Torres and Chris Mueller. We have to give them a little bit of time, but attack-wise, and they didn't have Shabilko on the weekend either. Attack-wise, it was woeful for them in this match. They really weren't able to get going. Shaqiri is a great player, but I still have the same question I had when he was signed. Who is he going to play with? And I don't know if there's an answer to that yet. Maybe Mueller, maybe Torres. But Chicago, I don't think their ownership, who has been pretty aggressive, is going to sit back and just watch it play out and just cross their fingers. I mean, what are they doing this summer?
Yeah, no, that's the question. And when I was thinking of Chicago, I think a great quote from Tyson, right, where he said at one point, everyone's got a plan until you get punch them out, right? And that's kind of what Chicago's at right now, right? Like they had a plan to start the year goals, but they weren't conceding goals. But now they are conceding goals, and they're still not scoring goals. And that's a bad combination. So the adversity has come. They've got to figure out how to come out of it. I'm not. I get this signing of Mueller. I'm not sold on it, right? Like I thought he was poor. I thought he was poor, but in that second year, and I don't know if he's going to then turn around and have a better showing coming back into the league. So I'm sure that obviously they're banking on that, but I could be wrong, but I'm not sold on that move.
I got one more for you, and let's go over to the Western side. The last game of the weekend was LA Galaxy going to Austin, winning 1-0. Austin FC, their Twitter account, their brand, they were very, oh, you don't believe in us, here you go, but ahead of the game. And, like, I've had my questions, and at home I didn't have questions. Now I've got more questions because they are very good. But have they done enough to climb into what I think is going to be the elite in the West? Seattle is elite even if they don't finish in an elite position because of CCL and focusing on that. They'll be in the playoffs. They're elite. You don't want to see them as a 7 seed at all if you're in the playoffs. Nashville, I think, is elite, and we're seeing what they're doing at home now that they had 8 games on the road to start. LA Galaxy, pretty close to elite, and maybe they are elite now with winning this game on the road. LAFC, we know, is elite. Colorado's fallen out of the elite. They were last year. Portland hasn't climbed back into it after reaching MLS Cup. Is Austin in that group, or are they in the not quite yet group?
I think we need, and this was a great opportunity for them to prove that they would be a contender in that, right? I think they need to win against elite to be an elite.
Let me put it this way. Who do you believe in more? If I told you one of these teams wins the West and goes to MLS Cup, which one do you think is more likely, Austin or Dallas?
Dallas.
I do too.
I think they've got a better base, a better nucleus. I think I love Juicy for Austin, but I think Ferreira, what he's doing in that false 9 role, and I think Areola was a great pickup for them. You've got Pomical healthy again, so I think their collective pieces are better than Austin's, and they have more of they've got more. Even though there's young pieces, they've got more experience in the bigger matches and performing well in those bigger matches than Austin does.
Yeah, I'm right there too, and I think like Montreal, Dallas is kind of a team that isn't getting a lot of that conversation, but I think they're good enough to be in that conversation by the end of the year. Should be now.
100%. And even though it's still a small sample size, right? What are they? They're 5-0-1 at home, right? So they're taking care of their business. They don't have a road win yet, but they only have 1 loss. They've got 3 draws in the road. So they're following that formula, right, of success. So, I think they're a team that's flying under the radar, but I think they love it, right? Like they do want the conversation. Like let LAFC have it and let Seattle have it. And even, the Galaxy have it and they'll just do their business.
So then is Austin in your mind right now just along that progression where you've gone from having that first year to making improvements, being in your second year, beating the teams you should beat, especially the ones at home, still having problems against the upper elite, and in the mix for those playoff spots at the bottom? So is it safe to say that they're progressing to a point, and it's not where you're going to have this massive jump and then coming back down? It's more of a solid progression forward under Josh Wolf?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're pushing forward, and I think they should be a playoff contender, as the season goes along. But you look at their schedule coming up, I think we'll learn a lot more about them in the next month or so, right? You go to Salt Lake, never an easy thing. You play LAFC, you host Orlando, and then you go to LA. So after those 4 matches, right, let's see where they are. But I think you've got to say, considering how they've done early in the season, that they are a legitimate playoff contender, right, in the West. So
Yeah, this is a really fun year because we talked about how tight the East is. In the West, you don't have the 9-point separation from top to bottom, but you've got a Seattle at the bottom that we're not expecting to be there. Vancouver finally gets a win, although it was rather dubious with their Toronto game, and that kind of leads me to the refereeing and a conversation about it and what we can do, or what Pro can do, honestly, I think, to fix some of this. Heard Bob Bradley's comments after the goal was taken away in Vancouver. I agree with him. I think it was a bad call, and you had the process to fix it, and it wasn't fixed. We talked about this yesterday because at times I think the reaction in general is too over the top about all referees are bad and they always cost everybody games, and it's too much.
And VAR doesn't work, and
it's way too much. But I think when you get these situations like this one, when you get the Brooks Lennon situation with being taken down in the 18, and they look at it, and Marufo doesn't go along with the VAR, and then Pro comes out on like a Saturday morning the next weekend and says that, yeah, he should have agreed with the VAR there. It's something that I think in other countries we generally see a faster reaction. We see a more thorough reaction of, this was a mistake. This was a mistake. This referee's not going to work this week. This referee's been suspended for a week, or they're going to work in the second division for a week. Do you think that would help the feeling about the level of refereeing in this country, or what could be done to fix that?
Yeah. And you've said it before, and I think you nailed it here. I mean, I think you need that transparency, but also consequences, right?
Yeah.
And both, like putting it out there, like maybe the official doesn't work a match next week, but unless you're kind of watching and seeing who's working, maybe you that's how you find out. And put it out there if you're Pro.
Yeah, and for example, Jair Marufo, who is one of the best in the league, and he was the referee in this situation in Miami, or in Fort Lauderdale with Atlanta and Inter Miami. He did not work in the middle the next weekend, but we don't know if that was just the way things were already assigned. Yeah. He was a VAR, and it's like,
did he pick up a knock? Like, did he?
Yeah, we don't know. And then you have the same referee and VAR duo in the LAFC Philadelphia game, and there was an incident with a kick out, studs up to the knee, that a lot of people felt like could have been a red on Palacios, and it was not sent down for a review. It's just these little things that I do think the reaction's over the top, and the feeling is that all referees are bad is way over the top. But Pro could help themselves so much if they would be more forthcoming in this stuff.
I couldn't agree more, 100%. And I think that's the way to do it, right? Like, I mean, I think they've taken good steps with their YouTube series and walking us through decisions, and if they were right and if they were wrong, and but now take the next step. Right.
Like, yeah, the consistency of that too. Like in the YouTube series, they didn't include the Lennon situation, but it was in the written piece, and they dropped the audio from the conversation with the VAR and the referee. And it's like, can we be thorough here in what we're doing? And Jair Marufo's a referee at such a good level that he makes a mistake and he has consequences for it and doesn't work the next week. It's not going to ding Jair Marufo's ability to work. I mean, it's not going to hurt him.
Yeah, and think about it from anyone else involved in a match, right? If the manager makes a mistake, he's got to hold his hand up and he's got to answer to the press, and same with the player, right? That mistake is out there. He's asked about it. The coach is asked about it, right? We know if he's not playing the next week because of that, right? We don't get that with the official. Like, of anyone who's involved in the match directly, they're the only ones. And I'm not saying they have to answer to the press. I get it, right? But there should be some level of explaining the situation, but then also explaining the consequences.
That's the trade-off for me, is that if, they're not going to answer to the media afterwards, which I'm fine with them not. I know a lot of people say that they should. There is the pool reporter system. I'm okay with them not, because I have heard some of the questions that they've been given that just you're not going to get anything out of that. Like
Correct.
it's easy to justify a call one way or another. If that's the trade-off, though, they're not going to do that, then Pro has to do it for them as a whole. And sure, you want to protect your people. I get it. But you've got to clean this stuff up a little bit more. So each week we're not talking about, wow, that should have been a penalty. That could have changed the game. Wow, this could have been a red card. That could have changed the game. Wow, how did they not give the goal to Toronto in this situation? Right. Like, we should have already heard about the games from this weekend by now and know what's going to happen. Otherwise, we're going to be refreshing Pro's website on Saturday morning at 8:00 to see if they posted anything.
Right. Yeah.
Because the last thing you need is a news dump just before everything slides back in for your next round of competition, to try to, instead of being as open / transparent / explanatory as you could be, it adds to a negative perception if you try to hide something, and it makes things look worse if you end up having to pull it off that way sometimes.
Oh, the handball in Nashville in their first game too. I knew there was one other big incident here recently that I never heard anything about that one, but I also wasn't refreshing on Saturday morning for the update, so I don't know.
Yeah, the NYCFC one I remember was the next day, but the next day was Sunday.
Yeah. It's just more consistency, I guess, is the biggest thing. And it's a Pro thing. I think at times people think that this is like the NFL where the referees work for the league, and they don't in this situation directly. So it
or
is
even have a regular day, like we know when the disco decisions come down, right? Yep. Generally speaking, Thursday, right? Mm-hmm. Because you've got the time. If you're consistently putting out a message at a certain time, then that's fine. That also gives you the opportunity as an organization to speak about it and have meetings and whatever you need to do internally, but then also put it out there at a regular time, right?
I want to finish with this one with you. Atlanta United, they get the win at home. Ronaldo Cisneros, player of the week, hat trick against Chicago. That's one story. That's a big story here, but the bigger story is Miles Robinson and another season-ending injury for Atlanta United, and this time to a U.S. men's national team player.
Yeah.
What did you take away from just the match in general, and how do you think the U.S. men's national team looks to replace Miles on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, two different thoughts there, right? One, it was a much needed win for Atlanta. And I think, again, we talk about being sustainable across time. Obviously, I don't think we expect Cisneros to get a hat trick every match, right? But it's good to know that you could perhaps depend on someone, right? That you have a somewhat consistent scorer when Joseph's not in, right? Because that was always, at least from the outside of Atlanta looking in, that was always the question, right? Joseph's hurt. Do they have anyone who can, on a regular basis, put the ball in the net? So, this one match was a great maybe starting point for him. And again, a big win. I think the first goal, I think, was a 11 pass sequence. Yeah. Really, really beautiful stuff. Lashes it under the crossbar, or off the other side of the crossbar. That was a great team goal as well, and kind of a good example of what we expect to see from Atlanta, what we have expected to see from Atlanta. And to the injury, I mean, just absolutely gutted for him. And it's the same, right? The Achilles, which, I mean, Anton Sinnerholm's still not back from his. It's a long-term, I'd even argue longer than an ACL injury. Which
can be. It's wild. Yeah. And there's a recent piece about in Yahoo. I don't know if it was posted today. I came across it today about Cam Akers in the NFL, and the NFL's trying to figure out why they've had an uptick in Achilles injuries. This is what comes up anytime we get one of these. Like, well, what did they do to prevent it? Right. Nobody knows how to prevent Achilles injuries. Like, literally, the NFL's commissioning a study to try to find factors of what is there about Achilles injuries. But Akers came back in 5.5, and he's like, wow, how did this happen?
Yeah.
It still feels very unknown in coming back from these. I think Beckham came back in, it was definitely less than 9 to 12. I think he was in the 7 or so range when he came back to play for the Galaxy after having the Achilles pop on him in Milan. So, like, you get some of these stories about people coming back quick, and then you get a tenor home. John Berner from Memphis 901, I always remember that one because I watched it last year against Atlanta United too. It's been close to a year for him, and he's not back.
Yeah.
It's just you don't know. And Miles just had the surgery. I mean, you can just cross your fingers and hope that he's like a Cam Akers and can get back quick, but you never know.
But yeah, so to your second question, just, Aaron Long is back from his injury. So you would say he's a candidate, right? You figure Zimmerman has locked in his spot. I think the depth now hurts, right? Where Berhalter's kind of gone. I think the John Anthony Brooks question is going to be a really interesting one, right? Like, do you go back to him now? Has he done enough for his club? Have you seen enough of what you want to see from him in your system to include him, especially now that you've got the injury? I think he's the big sort of X factor here. Miazga might be on the roster, but we've not really seen him right in the setup. I don't know. I mean, that's a big question, right? Like, I think the answer maybe is between Long taking the starting spot and Brooks coming in. And I don't hate having Brooks on the roster because he's got that experience, right? On a super young team, you need that guy. And we've seen him in some of the more hostile environments and situations. Like, you think back to matches against Mexico when guys are getting pushed around, and here comes John Anthony Brooks, like, negating everything, right? So you need that guy as well.
Yeah, I think you at least got to have a sit down with Brooks and figure out, can it work? If there's some other issue that some have alluded to that we don't really seem to know, like, can they sit down and work together? Because you got to have the conversation at this point. Long, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Eric Palmer-Brown are probably three who are going to stand to potentially benefit, but Brooks could end up making the trip now because of this. It's just, and we're not even really that close to the World Cup yet, and there's going to be other injuries across all these teams that have qualified, possibly including the U.S. So, buckle up.
Yeah, seriously.
It's going to get weird. Well, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. We will talk next week about Open Cup. We'll talk next week about League. I'm heading up to Nashville here in a bit. We are calling the match from Geodis Park tomorrow. Curious to see what the crowd's going to be like for an Open Cup game in Nashville. I don't really know because that stadium has looked amazing on TV. It's been crazy loud, but I don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow night. Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to and hopefully there is a good crowd, and looking forward to getting your assessment of the new stadium. Yeah, I think I still owe you assessments on stadiums. Last week got crazy, man. Good. I saw you were busy. A lot of matches. Yeah, and I'm screaming about goals from high school kids. So I'll get caught up this week. I'm in the same boat, same boat, just different sport. It gets nuts from time to time, but I owe you one. Thank you. Yeah, all good. All right, Dylan. We'll see you next week. All right, boys. Be good. Make sure you are following Dylan_Butler on your social media platforms. John, tell everybody about our good friends over at Eliminize.
Now, I can certainly do that. QR code over my left shoulder for those of you watching on Twitch. For odor-free, clean, fresh air, one place you need to go. It's Eliminize service, deodorizing enclosed spaces like houses, apartments, and condos. Eliminize has created a customized solution that eliminizes all organic odors like those around pit cigarettes and food. Realtors and property managers use Eliminize service to eliminate bad odors to help them sell or rent those homes that much faster. It's a turnkey process that makes it easy to work with said realtors and property managers. Kind of the environment, we like that. Offering a green way to get rid of odors without any kind of toxic residue whatsoever. Different than our favorite masking agents that we have under the sink, because when you take that masking agent out from underneath the sink and you spray it in the air, that's all it does. Just masks the odor. It doesn't attack the problem like Eliminize with their proven scientific formula that attacks problems all the way down to the molecule. Pricing is easy, using cubic meter parts per million to come up with a price that's affordable for you. Results in 24 hours or less. If you have any questions, frequently asked or otherwise, go to the website, Aluminize.com, but do us a favor here at SDH. After the .com goes /Atlanta, so they know what part of the world that you are talking to them from. So your full assignment, ELIMINIZE.com /Atlanta, Aluminize.com /Atlanta. For odor-free, clean, fresh air, Aluminize service is where you need to go. Aluminize, proud sponsors of everything SDH.
Nicely done. You were actually kind of fast on that one.
I was?
It's weird.
Wow. Okay.
You sped up at the end. Usually you slow down at the end, I think.
Okay. That's a new one. I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah. It's weird. UEFA catches everybody by surprise. They actually get this thing done for what the competitions are going to look like in 24-25. So they make their announcement. People said that they would not be making an announcement today. UEFA said, ha, 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 here it is. This is for the competitions as of the 24-25 European season, introducing the so-called Swiss system. It's going to be 8 matches instead of 10. It's going to be played over 10 European weeks. The Champions League, Europa League, and Europa Conference League will all enjoy 1 week of calendar exclusivity. That'll be interesting. 4 additional places created by the increase from 32 to 36 in the league phase of the UEFA Champions League will be allocated as follows. 1 place will go to the club ranked 3rd in the championship of the association in 5th position in the National Association ranking. Cool. 1 place will be awarded to a domestic champion by extending from 4 to 5 the number of clubs qualifying via the so-called Champions Path. I think that's a little complicated, but getting 1 more league champion into this phase rather than having to go through the qualification process is roughly what that means. And here's the controversial one, or at least it was coming in. The final 2 places will go to the associations with the best collective performance by their clubs in the previous season, and that's European season. Total number of points obtained divided by the number of participating clubs. Those 2 associations will earn 1 place for the club best ranked in the domestic league behind the Champions League positions. For example, and they give you an explanation here. For example, at the end of the current season, the 2 associations that would be adding 1 club to the Champions League based on the collective performance of their clubs would be England and the Netherlands. Now, that would be if this was going into effect next year. It's not. So that's how it will work. All games before the final will still be played midweek. You've got quotes. That's where it stands. So they found a compromise, and it's fine. It's pretty good. I'm good with the way they're allocating the teams. I feel good about that. 8 games versus 10. And the format they're going to do with this Swiss style thing where you're playing 8 different teams, 4 home and 4 away. I was fine with 10. I don't know if 2 fewer games makes a big difference on the domestic calendars, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So, they'll get to 10 eventually. It's not like they're not going to play 10 group games in Europe at any point. It's just been delayed a while. It's like all the other advancements in competitions that we've seen in tournaments. It's going to expand. We know that it is because that's how you head off a Super League, right? You have more games with big teams playing big teams. Just win. When does the money look good enough to say, oh, it would be even more if we get 2 more? Because that'll happen. I give it 5 years. I think by 2030, we'll see the 10-game group stage. That's my gut feeling.
Figured you'd go through another World Cup cycle past 26. Since you're saying that this is going to start 24-25, you give it 5, it's 2030. So if my math is right, according to what their proposal would have been, Spurs and Feyenoord would have been the teams that would have gotten in.
Yeah, it'd be 5th in England in that case. So they would get in automatically and go through it. So that's what it would have been for this year. It'll be the 23-24 season in Europe that will determine where those extra 2 spots go. That's where it stands. So UEFA makes their announcement. Good job, UEFA, getting business done, not wasting everybody's time. Couple of other things to touch on that we have not as of yet. TV ratings for last week: Real Madrid, Manchester City, 2.377 million watched it across 3 different networks. 1.1 million on CBS, 906,000 on Univision. That's not much of a difference. And 371 additional thousand on TUDN. So in Spanish, it was watched more than it was in English. CCL, 784,000 on Unimas for the second leg, Seattle and Pumas. 458,000 on TUDN. 300,000 in English on FS1. That's a total of 1.542 million, and substantially more in Spanish than in English. But that Champions League number is important. Yes, it involved Real Madrid. Yes, that probably factors into this to a degree. But there is still a perception that when we talk about TV ratings and who likes soccer, and I know now there's the updates that like, oh, it's going to pass the NHL as the number 4 in the Big 4. Just call it Big 5. It's fine. You don't have to knock anybody out of it. The NHL is not going to go away. The NHL is going to be what the NHL is. I don't think it's going to grow dramatically because I think there's just severe limitations on how it can grow. There's just places that you're not going to have kids growing up playing hockey, period. Kids are going to grow up playing soccer. They stay connected to the game. There's going to be more potential soccer fans. That's not hard to follow. It doesn't have to diminish something else. But yes, you do have to give the respect to soccer as a whole, and whether it's MLS or it's just the game as a whole, and we talk about all of it lumped together because it's unique. American football doesn't have that. Baseball doesn't have that. Basketball doesn't have that. Hockey doesn't have that. It is a global conversation about soccer because we are talking about Champions League rating and then CONCACAF Champions League rating and then MLS and then Liga MX and then the Premier League. But in all of those conversations, one of the major things that gets left out at all times is viewership for the game in this country in Spanish is hugely significant for all of it, not just Liga MX. But there's a perception that the Premier League is the most watched league in this country. It is not. Liga MX is. That's why you have a Leagues Cup that's about to happen, because it's very important for that to happen from MLS and Liga MX's perspective. Money to be made. But in these situations too, I mean, Champions League viewed more in Spanish than in English, and it was on CBS. So it has to be kept in mind that we can't. I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker. I watch a lot of games in Spanish, but I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker. If you're not, you can't rule out how important games being televised in Spanish are. And I know if you don't have the availability to watch the MLS game of the week that's on Univision or TUDN or Unimas, you don't have the availability to watch it in English. Well, you do have English language radio in most places, and we like to help you with that. They do have, and I think they need to put a little more into it because of this. I think they can put higher standards into their broadcasts in English. I hope that they do. It's very hit or miss is what I've found. Generally calling it from a monitor, which is always difficult, but it's hit or miss in terms of the quality and the affinity and I think understanding of the league, which is something that has to change and has to improve. But the reason why it exists, the reason why you have a national TV broadcast and exclusivity in Spanish language is because of these ratings. And for MLS, that's important to have. Now, can they find ways to navigate it to where they get that exclusivity, but it is available in English in a higher level platform than Twitter or an SAP function? It needs to be. And that needs to be figured out. That's important going forward. But yeah, Spanish language TV for this game in this country, it is a critical component to the growth of it. And I love what they're doing with how they're putting into it. I love what they're doing with what they're putting into it. Yeah, Turner, they did call the Fox did call the CONCACAF Champions League final from a monitor, but you had 2 announcers who knew the league and knew those teams and knew that competition, which is what doesn't always happen with the Univision English language broadcast. And is it just a personnel thing? Is it just a scheduling thing? You've got Liga MX. It's going to take the priority for them. That's the highest rated thing. A secondary audio feed is not high on the list of priorities. It's not. And I understand that. But too many times it feels like there's just people who don't know the league well. And that will help everybody if you can address that. You can call games from monitors. I don't like it. I've done it. It's not as good in general, but it can still be a really good broadcast and deliver for the audience that's out there if that's what the situation is. And I don't know all the financials that go into those decisions. I'm not cutting the checks, so I understand it. I get it, especially as we're coming out of COVID and you've got some broadcasters who lost a lot of money and you've got some broadcasters that maybe are not coming back, and MLS broadcasts are different than CONCACAF Champions League. I don't know what the long term is for CONCACAF Champions League, but there have been a lot of advancements in being able to call games from monitors. I would always prefer to be in the building, but it is a lot easier to call a game from a monitor than it used to be. Whole lot easier from just the time that I've been doing it. Whole lot easier, and it can be done well. It's not that can't be an excuse anymore for not delivering a good broadcast. It just can't. And I thought the CONCACAF Champions League final was a good broadcast. I didn't have any problems with the broadcast that Fox put on at all. Thought it was good. COVID did make the remote calls more common, although in the soccer world they've always been a big component. Audi Field, once I got locked in, DM Tim, I was okay. It was uncomfortable because it's just it is literally like you have to put blinders on to kind of get locked into a position to see it. And when you look away and try to look back, it just messes with you. I would have no problem calling it from a monitor if I was in that if I was in that booth instead. I would not have a problem with that, not being there and calling it from a monitor. It might be a better broadcast, depending. But then you're at other people's mercy with what camera angles you get. And go back to the TV game I did from DC last year that we were not in DC, that we did not travel because travel was not happening yet at that point. And we missed the free kick goal because they took it quick. And there was nothing we could do. We didn't see it live. So it's broadcast it's easy to throw stones at it without knowing all of the things that go into it. And it is complicated, and it is changing so rapidly. The ideas of being on linear versus being on cable versus being on a stream, that has changed so fast, so quick, that in another year, I don't know what's preferred. Doing a TV deal right now has got to be difficult because you're doing the next 2-3 years, and you're doing what the future looks like, and nobody really seems to know. For example, and kind of crossing streams a little bit, going into another aspect of TV, pro wrestling and what AEW is doing on TNT, on a Turner network. You go back to the old days where WCW was on Turner. When AEW launched and got to that point, being on normal TV, on cable TV, but being on normal TV on cable packages was a critical component for acceptance, for reputation, for perception. That was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have leading TV execs, not in the wrestling industry, in the TV industry, saying that, they might be better off being on streaming and not being on TV, because they're on TV and you can't watch it on a stream outside of being connected to having it on TV. You can't go to a Paramount Plus and watch it. You can't go to Peacock and watch it. WWE has found a little bit of both kind of conversation, because they're on cable, but then it's available the next day on streaming outside of being a cable subscriber. It's not live, but it's the next day. AEW doesn't have that. And you've got leading TV execs saying, well, you need that. Now, you're not going to watch soccer games the next day. Like, that part doesn't help you. Live sports are still really the biggest driver for traditional TV and cable. But all of that is changing so fast. And add in another language into the component here. with Spanish language and how important that is. And it is a complicated conversation with being on site, with English, Spanish, with streaming versus over the air versus cable. It is very, very complicated. And I would not want to have to be guessing where the landscape is going to go in the next 5 years. And that's why this deal, I almost wonder if they do a little bit shorter deal. And I almost wonder in general if TV deals that everybody's going to do are going to be a little bit shorter here in the current times, just because you can not get caught in a bad situation as the landscape changes. I like the little extra feedback when Jarrett's mic is open, and it sounds kind of Darth Vader-ish.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's just when you bring me into the show. That's
I know. Oh, I know.
I carry gremlins in my pocket at all times to ruin technology.
I also know. I know how that goes. No, we're just talking about TV and where everything goes with the TV ratings last week that were very good. I mean, you're going to get somebody who's going to say they're very bad, and you're going to get somebody who says they're very good. I think 2.377 for Champions League semifinal is very good across English, Spanish, and you do have to look at both. You can't separate one or the other anymore. 1.542 for CONCACAF Champions League second leg over English, Spanish is very good. 300,000 on FS1 is actually a very good rating on FS1, which doesn't have the overall carry that some other networks do. But the landscape, and Jarrett, you've been involved in broadcast for a long time too. Like, the landscape is just changing so much about calling games on site, calling games from a monitor, having Spanish language factor in, streaming versus TV versus cable. It's all unpredictable right now.
It is. It's hard to measure. It's hard to gauge though, because you can't just, to your point, you can't just look at the TV numbers and say, well, this many people tuned in to watch it over the air through their cable system, and that's how we're going to base it on. Like, people are using ways to stream, and sometimes illicit. We're not catching those, obviously. I'm not advocating for it. I'm saying people do it. But people also, people share accounts. So you might get, hey, this person watched it. Well, they might have shared their login information with two other people who also got a chance to watch it. So it's so hard to pin down these numbers, man. It's an ever-changing marketplace.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. We will keep up with it. We're still waiting on an MLS broadcast deal that should be coming out at any point.
If you're like basing your happiness or the value of everything just off of that, it's going to be an up and down chaotic life to lead, man. There's
like
better ways to do it.
It's like anything where you can find numbers that make you feel good, or you can find numbers that make you feel bad.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we're doing the same thing. We're honestly, let's bring this back to Atlanta. I feel like we're doing the same thing with the injuries. There are studies that support and disprove your point.
I've had so many things
you
pointed
can
at
always construct a poll or an information idea around what you want it to reflect.
There's going to be a study somewhere to hurt or to help your point in any direction. The validity of the study is, always up in question.
It's not so much that it's not valid. It's just what it covers. Like the one study that was cited a lot yesterday about, well, there's a huge difference in Achilles injuries on turf versus on grass. But when you get down to the actual number of injuries over the period of time of the study, it was like 0.016%. Like, it was a very small number. I'll give you this, and I mentioned it when we were talking to Dylan. It's in the Yahoo article about Cam Akers and his recovery from an Achilles injury in less than 6 months. Over the past 6 months, the NFL has endured an unprecedented spike in Achilles tears. A whole bunch of different ones. The league has asked orthopedic surgeon Dr. Robert Anderson to lead a study examining how and why these Achilles injuries are occurring. Anderson said, when you look over 5 years, it could turn out to be a blip on the screen, but there have been more Achilles tendon injuries than usual this season, so there's more emphasis on studying it. One of the things that Anderson wanted to answer is what football position groups are vulnerable to Achilles tears. Do most of them happen when a player is worn down or coming off a period of rest? How big a factor is dehydration? Anderson wants to review video of Achilles tears to see if there's any consistency, correlation, and how they occur. Anderson said this: we still don't know why these things happen. That's really important. I'll say it one more time. Dr. Robert Anderson, who has treated Patrick Mahomes, Steph Curry, Derek Jeter, we still don't know why these things happen. So be careful in saying why they happen if you're not a doctor who has been involved in these things. But it is happening a little bit more. I found a study of injuries, Achilles injuries in Major League Soccer from 96 to 16, and it was like 23 Achilles injuries in that period of time. And when you talk about position groups in American football, what was interesting from that study, and again, when you talk the overall number of injuries in MLS in the first 20 years of the league versus 23 Achilles injuries, it's almost one per year at that point. It's very small, so it could be blips on the screen. But the overwhelming majority of the injuries with Achilles injuries in that time period came from defenders and goalkeepers. Mostly defenders, actually. Yeah. Well, you say it makes sense. Why do you think it makes sense?
Because of from a defender standpoint, it's quick plant, quick movement, change of direction, having to backtrack, having to go forward, just the multiplicity of angles that you have to do and you have to take care of from a defender standpoint. You've got to go forward quickly, you've got to backtrack quickly, and it's about planting and changing directions, those kinds of things. That's why it made sense to me with defenders.
Well, I follow your logic, but when we've got leading doctors trying to figure out what position groups are affected more in other sports, I'm not jumping to the conclusion off of very small numbers. The ones that I have seen personally, whether I've been watching the game live or been in the building for it, have been those kinds of movements. It's been the step back, step forward kind of deal with Gazan, with Robinson, with Burner from Memphis. It's, and the talk about turf versus grass, I mean, you can find studies either way. Like there's not a major difference. It's actually better on turf. You're not accounting for good grass versus bad grass in situations. Remember Philadelphia last year and how the field was not in great shape. A few months before that's when Aaron Long ruptured his Achilles at Philadelphia. I don't know how the turf was at that day, but it's a natural surface. There's so many variables, and Achilles injuries are not super common. That's why what's happening right now with Atlanta United is one of the most bizarre things you'll ever find, because we don't know. We don't know why. We don't know what is causing it in terms of anything other than just it's happening. Like it is a crazy situation, but be careful with trying to make numbers dance and trying to make studies dance, because somebody else will have a study the other way.
So as far as this goes, and I have a question that I'd be interested to see what the studies are on this. And call it a hypothesis, if you will. And I feel like I have to preface this without trying to make, I don't mean to make it sound like a rush to judgment. So let me preface that, because I feel like that's going to be the thing we're all doing right now.
Yeah, you can't.
I feel like we push athletes so hard these days, and not just in terms of training, but like we train for explosiveness. The athletes of today are more explosive than they have been in the past. You train to a point of explosiveness, of get off, of that quick twitch. We want you to explode from a standing spot. Yep. It's a lot of strain on the body. I mean,
it's a lot of strain on that part of the body for sure.
Yeah, and I do wonder, again, I don't have a study for this. I do wonder if all of this push for explosiveness out of athletes is putting more and more strain on all their ligaments. And yeah, the Achilles would be one that would suffer in that situation. But I wonder if it's a matter of we're putting more strain on the human body. The human body just hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah, we really don't know. And that's one that's going to be really hard to quantify. The other thing that has been brought up, I think Gonzalo Pineda mentioned it yesterday, that is a hypothesis from not just him, but others as well, because I've seen it, in terms of overall injuries increasing. And yeah, that could carry over to the Achilles, is the layoff from COVID. and it was unexpected, and it changed your kind of body calendar a little bit. It changed the way you trained. I mean, that year you trained for a season, you did a preseason, you started a season, then you stopped doing everything. Then you started doing some things, but you're more worried about the COVID restrictions and what you can do versus the actual activities you're doing as you're ramping back up. And then you're ramping up, and then you're stopping, and then you're slowly ramping up, but in a completely different way than you would have ramped up. And then you play, and then you have a short off season, then you play again. It's tough. It's tough. Could that factor in? We probably won't know for a few years, honestly, because these studies take time. I think the study on the first 20 years of MLS didn't come out until like 2019, and it ran through 2016. So we're not going to know for a while, but yeah, it sucks. And it sucks for Miles. He posted a message after surgery. Hopefully he's on the Cam Akers kind of timeline, because it was less than 6 months for Akers, and everybody was shocked, but he was good and he came back. You're hoping that it's something like that. There have been a number of advancements in the surgery itself, how you do the surgery, which will prevent atrophy. I mean, back in the day, you did this, and I think you were in a cast for like 8 to 10 weeks or something, which, you're not moving your lower leg, and it affects all the other muscles. And then it's hard to get them back to where they were. You're trying to avoid those situations. We've learned a lot more. So guys are coming back quicker. Some are, not everybody is, because this is a really difficult one that there's a lot of unknowns about. A lot of injuries, or a lot of athletes are more worried about this kind of an injury than an ACL tear. Definitely more than a broken bone, because you kind of know how to deal with that one. But we've seen so many in the NBA. The NFL has started to pick up, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're commissioning studies to try to figure this out. MLS would be well served to get involved in this, and see if there's if it can cover both, if you can do one of each, if you can lump it together, and if you can learn different things especially about the prevention, because that's the great unknown with this. Is there anything you can do to prevent it? Right now, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And these are people who deal with athletes' bodies that are worth millions, maybe billions of dollars at times, and they don't know. So keep that in mind when we're yelling about this on the Bird app and people say they know. Nobody knows. It's very difficult. The NFL, if anybody's going to know about an injury and how to prevent it and how to deal with it, it's the NFL, with the insane amount of money that they bring in every year and how valuable those athletes are. Yeah, and they don't know. So it's a wild time. It is a very wild time, and we will keep up with it as best as we can. Also, there's a little bit of this. Speaking of wild times, Erling Haaland is going to Manchester City, and it is official now. Statement confirms Manchester City can confirm we have reached an agreement in principle with Borussia Dortmund for the transfer of striker Erling Haaland on July 1st. Wow. They didn't waste any time. The transfer remains subject to the club finalizing terms with the player. Yeah, you're going to finalize terms with the player. You got to have boilerplates and stuff in places, but yes. So Erling Haaland not going to Real Madrid as had been originally discussed. We knew he was going to leave Dortmund. This does kind of throw Hans-Joachim Watzke's comments from Dortmund about transfer release clauses and such and all of that, where I think he was terming them as bullish. Yeah, there's a release clause because that's how this is getting done in some form or fashion. Maybe it is more of a handshake release clause or a signed thing release clause, or it's a wiggle room amount release clause. It's getting done because of a release clause of some sort. And Haaland will go to Manchester City next year. And the question will be, how does his game fit, adapt to Pep Guardiola? Pep has had a ton of success this year, and you can throw whatever shade you want at Pep, and people do. He has had a ton of success this year, and he might win the Premier League without an elite number 9. Well, he's got one coming. He's got Julian Alvarez coming too from River Plate. He's going to have a lot to work with.
Is that
year.
confirmed, or is that all?
Yeah, that's
but
been confirmed.
I mean, no, I thought it was like
that's been confirmed.
I thought they could back out of it if they needed to.
No,
why I say that.
No, that's been confirmed.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
You could loan him somewhere if you wanted
Yeah.
to, but that's a different conversation. No, the deal is done with Alvarez to Manchester City in July as well. So you're going to play a lot of games. You're going to need lots of players. Well, you got 2 great strikers. One, seen as one of the best young strikers in the world by the world, and Alvarez, who I think should be in that conversation, but is coming from River, who, as there's a lot of people who don't expect him to come in and do as well as I think he can, because I think he's got the game too. What do you think this does for the power structure in the Prem, John, in your wonderful league that you like to discuss? What does Liverpool do in response?
Oh, I'm sure they'll come up with something, but
they're plucky upstarts, John. They don't have much money. They can't.
That is true. They are
right?
plucky upstarts, but I think that the first thing that they do is make sure that they keep Salah under contract. And
they're going to be able to do that.
I'm sure they'll find a way. Some folks may not be happy.
Why are you so sure about that?
Hey, when you see the folks that are above you in the table, making,
I get that, but John, you're acting like Mo Salah doesn't have any say in this.
Oh, I know.
He can play out his contract and walk.
He can.
Don't you think Mo Salah just became more valuable to
a
certain
you can
club that wears white
absolutely.
in
He
Madrid?
and his agent can drive up the price and sit there and pretty much name their tag, and it's going to be a chase to figure it out. And I think that Fenway Sports Group, this is going to be a challenge for them financially to try to figure out how all the pieces fit. But I think that it turns into a number one priority to try to lock him down, even with the notion of free agency being what it can be these days for players in Europe.
Yes, Liverpool already got Luis Diaz, but that's not a response to a move that hadn't happened yet. There's going to have to be a response to Erling Haaland coming in to Manchester City, I would think, because this would tip it. And no, Luis Diaz isn't in the same conversation as Erling Haaland in terms of impact. I think Julian Alvarez might be a little bit closer to that. So Liverpool will have to keep Mo Salah, who is older than Haaland, and that is a little bit of a question as to how much you commit to keeping him. Jarrett, you've got Kylian Mbappe, who some are reporting will be in Madrid next year. Some are saying that he will re-sign with PSG. We don't really seem to know. It seems like the line would tip towards Madrid, and I would think it tips harder now because I think they do have to deliver on it, because after all the talk that Real Madrid has put out there through themselves or through others about the dream is Haaland and Mbappe. Well, Benzema has told you don't necessarily need to go get anybody because he's still ridiculous, but he's also older.
Mm-hmm.
Does Kylian Mbappe to Real Madrid become more likely with Haaland to Manchester City, or does it really affect it in your mind, Jarrett?
I don't know, man. Like, I can never keep up with this telenovela that they run about who's going where, who's been reported where, whose dad said what, whose mom said what, whose agent said what. Oh, what is it this week? What was it last week? What is it going to be next week? I don't really know. I would think that him going to Real, I was under the impression he wanted to go to Madrid. Like, remember early this season, late 2021, I thought he was in that mood to go to Real Madrid anyway. Karim Benzema has done yeoman's work. How long can Karim Benzema do it, though? As we talked about before, the older you get, the cliff upon which you fall off of eventually becomes more sheer the older you get. So at what point does Benzema start to slow down? Can he reproduce this? Barcelona looks like the kind of team that it kind of had ups and downs this year, but it's going in the right direction. Will they be able to challenge Real Madrid next year? Does Real Madrid decide, hey, we're going to go get an Mbappe, or we're going to go find someone else, and we're going to try and, smack Barcelona down a peg? We're going to try and go get a Champions League for next year and keep this going in some way, shape, or form. Mbappe would make sense in that respect. I mean, I'm curious what the price tag is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more than it was for Erling Haaland. He's out of contract. There's not going to have to be a transfer fee for Kylian Mbappe,
but the weekly wages are going to be
salary and signing bonus will have to be absurd. The Athletic understands Manchester City will pay just 60 million euro for the release clause at Borussia Dortmund. So it's really back to where it originally, honestly, it's less than it was originally talked about at Dortmund, if that is accurate from David Ornstein.
65 originally?
I thought it was 75, but it's moved around so many times I can't keep up at times. It was more than that, and it was then supposed to be even higher than that. 60 million euro is the release clause here. And there were some reports in Madrid that, oh, no, we said we're not going to be able to get a deal with Haaland done. And then there's other reports saying, yeah, he told you that you're not getting a deal done. I kind of think it's the latter. I think Madrid has tried to spin it as to, well, they wanted a release clause of 150 million after 2 years, and we didn't want to do that. And he wanted X, Y, and we're worried about the injuries. Like, there's been a lot of spin, which is what you do. I mean, it happens in all sports. It happens in any of these where you don't get what you want, and oh no, we didn't want it. Really, we didn't. You did.
Yeah.
But what they do in response is going to get really, really interesting because Mbappe will trigger a lot of other things. You've got Victor Osimhen, who could go for anywhere between 70 to 100 million euro from Napoli to Arsenal to Manchester United. This is just at the forward position. You're going to have a trickle down to other positions as well. You're going to have other moves. And as Nick Alifi said on Soccer Over There last night, you're going into a window in the summer where clubs have, at least some, have bounced back from the financial difficulties of COVID. You've had a year with fans in the stands and a lot of places, not completely across the board, but 100% availability of selling tickets. And you've got money back in the coffers. And a lot of clubs ended up cutting things down to where they were okay during COVID. And now they're back fresh with cash, and things could get really stupid this summer. This domino is a big one. It is a big one to fall because I think Liverpool, yes, will do something because they can and they have to. They have to do something to improve their group to stay with City because this improves City. I'm sorry, Erling Haaland versus Gabriel Jesus.
Yeah,
you've improved if you're Manchester City. And Liverpool and City were already a step ahead of everybody else. So Liverpool to stay there has to do something. It's an arms race. Arsenal, Tottenham, Manchester United, Chelsea, that group that has money. Chelsea should have everything to be able to spend money this summer now. What do they do in response? Because they just see that gap getting further away from them with City. And they're going to have to do something in response. Do they do something stupid in response? Well, that's what normally happens in these situations. You overpay for somebody because there's only so many elite guys. And you say, oh, no, I can make that guy elite. Maybe not. They might not be elite. You might pay elite money. That's just on the English side because then you have that Champions League conversation and you have a Real Madrid conversation. You know, do they get more aggressive for Mbappe? I kind of think they might. And I think that's already been trending that way anyway with some of the conversations, you know, Mbappe's mom on Twitter saying, oh, no, we're good. Everything's good. We'll let you know in June. It's all good. There's rumors out there that it's going to be a done deal for him to go to Madrid, and it's going to be a huge check. There's also rumors that PSG is going to offer him even more money to stay. That's just going to ramp up now. And then other players are going to get put into that mix. Robert Lewandowski could be another one who moves because of this, where it's, oh, wait a minute, we weren't able to get Haaland. We didn't get Mbappe. We could get Lewandowski, and Barcelona's been talking about bringing in Lewandowski. That's a lot more in their price range.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of things that are going to start to fall now. And
I mean, I could see Paris deciding to do that if they lose Mbappe.
I don't think he goes there, though, because I think he's in a different conversation than a young up-and-comer who wants to get fat checks. Lewandowski's done everything. He wants to win.
Yeah. He doesn't have to go there. I could see them giving him a call, though, for sure.
Yeah, I think they generally give a call to everybody. But I think it's a certain kind of player that goes there or certain situations that work there. It's why Messi going there, although There really wasn't a lot of other places Messi could go at that point that made sense, really made sense. That's why it hasn't worked. I don't think Lewandowski goes there because of that. I think Lewandowski could really end up in Barcelona. I really think that could happen because the price range actually suits Barca. And, how long does he have? That's the question with Benzema. How long can he do what he's doing? We've seen Ronaldo do it for a long, long time. And then you have that element. Cristiano Ronaldo, probably not going to be at Manchester United next year. Does somebody kick the tires on another year of Ronaldo scoring a bunch of goals? As we've seen at Juve and as we've seen at Manchester United, you got to bend the way you play to get anything out of him at this stage of his career. But if you do, he can get you goals. Is there somebody who would be willing to do that on a 1 year to hang around?
Could that be a PSG phone call if Domino's goes?
That would make a ton of sense. That would make a ton of sense. Would be Cristiano Ronaldo at PSG for a year or two. That one I could buy because they don't really have a system, a style. I mean, they're going to have somebody else in charge as a manager. That's easy. That's easy for them to adapt to. The question for me, as we've went through a bunch of questions, the big ones for me, Liverpool and their response, Real Madrid, and does this make them double down to get Mbappe? It becomes a must. And then that next tier in England, are they intelligent in how they handle it, or do you get somebody acting like a lottery winner idiot and just throwing money around to try to keep up? I think you get somebody to do that.
Yeah, I think somebody panics.
And you've got some who can do that and still be fine. Chelsea, like the money they're going to have, Bowley, he could do that if he wanted to. Newcastle's not going to do that. I think Newcastle actually has formulated a plan. They should not try to make the gap happen this year. They should this year solidify themselves as a mid-table, maybe European contender, maybe not top 4, but Europa League, Champions League. They need to look at this over like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I don't think they come in throwing cash around like a lunatic, but I think they spend some money for sure. But Chelsea's the one that you've got a new owner. How aggressive is he going to be? Because they're solidly third in terms of quality. But they're not with City anymore. And I don't think they're at Liverpool's level. And they've got their own questions about what they have and who needs to go and what they need to go get.
Yep.
They're the ones that could tip it either way to me. I think Tottenham isn't going to go nuts, and that might cost them Conte in the long run, and they might just be who they are. Arsenal, I don't think will go nuts, and they're building, and they just might be who they are. Manchester United thinks they're something else right now. They have a new manager coming in with a new style, but not necessarily somebody who's going to go target every star in the world. It's a little more specific as to what you're looking for. So maybe that keeps them from being complete idiots. Chelsea has the potential to be drunken fools at the bar at the end of the night.
Yep.
They also have the potential to do some really good business. They're going to have resources. So the dominoes are going to start falling. It's going to get really, really interesting with the news this morning that Erling Haaland has had an agreement reached with Borussia Dortmund and Manchester City on the release clause. Manchester City says they still have to finalize the individual terms with Haaland, that they're done or they're all but done. Maybe it hasn't been signed. And everything else is going to start to happen now as a silly season has just gotten sillier officially. I think we knew it was going to happen. Now it's officially going to be stupid season.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Chelsea. You're losing Christensen and Rudiger, and you're probably going to want to get rid of Romelu Lukaku. What do you do to fill those spaces, especially at the back? And with what we're seeing with Manchester City and Liverpool and trying to keep up, you want to try to stay third. You've got to fill these gaps that you're losing and try to add to it. So I think that Chelsea, for me, obviously with Bowley, is the one that I'm going to be staring at a lot.
Well, but you're bringing up a different conversation about spending because, and it's more along the lines of, I think, what a Newcastle is going to do, and honestly what a Manchester United, I think, is going to do in terms of Chelsea needs certain guys. Like signing a replacement for Antonio Rudiger or Andreas Christensen is not going to move the needle as, oh my God, it's silly season.
Right.
They need to do that. And Manchester United needs to make those kind of moves. And Newcastle needs to continue to bolster what they have. Does Chelsea go out and make the eye-popping kind of a move? Does Chelsea now, with their money, do they say, we need a big splash? Hey, Mr. Mbappe, we would like to talk to you. Do they go and drop crazy money on moving Lukaku back to Inter and bringing Osimhen in? Do they get into that sweepstakes? Like, Chelsea hasn't been involved in these conversations because of everything going on. They can throw themselves into this conversation now. They can kick the door down on conversations. It can get really interesting. So we will see where all of this goes. But you got a lot of subplots now. Alan Shearer with a piece at The Athletic in the UK about his understanding of Erling Haaland and why he's such an exciting signing for Manchester City. If anybody knows about goal scorers, it's Alan Shearer. So that'll be an interesting read for sure. We'll see. So lots of things out of UEFA today. Some other things on the board before we go. We will have normal show tomorrow. We will have stoppage time tomorrow afternoon with, it appears to be a special guest of Kevin Egan on stoppage time tomorrow afternoon. Talking Open Cup, talking Atlanta United. That's on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. Mike will be checking in on the road. I am heading up a day early so I can do all the shows and get everything done. Game tomorrow night, and then we'll have a normal Thursday show for you as a reaction show to everything that happens in the Open Cup. I'm really curious to see what the crowd's going to look like in Nashville, because I don't have an understanding of this. Other things news-wise, FIFA's appeal committee has ruled on Monday that the abandoned World Cup qualifier between Brazil and Argentina, which means nothing about qualifying for the World Cup, must be replayed. Idiots. If you remember, this was suspended in September when Brazilian health officials invaded the pitch to stop Argentina's England-based players from playing, saying they had breached the country's COVID quarantine rules. And yes, one of the health officials was packing a gun in his back pocket, or I think in his waistband, actually. They've already qualified. It means nothing. FIFA ruled in February it had to be played. It's been appealed. It will be played. There's a fine of $50,000 that's imposed on both associations as a result of the abandonment of not playing it before. Originally, Argentina was being fined 200,000 Swiss francs, and Brazil is being fined 500,000. It's been knocked down to 50,000 Swiss francs, which is roughly $50,000. They reduced it on appeal. Argentina said they would take their appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I don't know if they will now. Brazil and Argentina were going to play in a friendly in Australia in June, and then at some point that was going to be this qualifier. They were going to make it there, and now I don't think that's going to happen. And yeah, all kinds of stupid. This game doesn't need to be played. CONMEBOL has done something good. They have increased sanctions on clubs with players, officials, and fans deemed guilty of racist behavior. They increased the sanctions on Monday. There's been a bunch of incidents in Libertadores and Sudamericana. With immediate effect, any player or official found guilty of discrimination will be banned for a minimum of 5 games or 2 months, the Confederation said. Any club whose fans are judged to have partaken in discriminatory behavior will be fined a minimum of $100,000. That's more than 3 times the previous minimum, and could be forced to play games behind closed doors. I don't know what the scale is to get to behind closed doors. Sanctions apply to discrimination on grounds of skin color, race, sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity, language, or creed, according to CONMEBOL. There were a bunch of incidents in April. Racist gestures aimed at Brazilian players in the Copa Libertadores and the Copa Sudamericana. Brazilians playing against teams from Argentina, Chile, and Ecuador were targeted. The Brazilian Federation called for an international crusade against racism and discrimination. And CONMEBOL has answered that with increased sanctions on these incidents, which is a good thing by CONMEBOL. FIFA, UEFA, y'all need to catch up. Y'all flat out need to catch up on this. Rumored innuendo, Dortmund now with 60 million euro from this release clause on Erling Haaland. They are set to wrap up a deal with Karim Adeyemi from Red Bull Salzburg. According to Sky Germany, he's in Dortmund, undergoing a medical before signing a contract until 2027. 38 million euro is the price it looks like Dortmund will pay. 3 million in bonuses to sign the 20-year-old striker. So a lot of that release clause is going to go to Adeyemi. Barcelona, according to Gerard Romero, have closed the transfer of Felipe Coutinho to Aston Villa in the last few hours. 20 million euro Barcelona will get. They'll keep 50% of the players' rights. The agent for Coutinho is the same as Steven Gerrard, and Gerrard wants to keep Coutinho, and it looks like they're going to get it done. Newcastle have expressed an interest in Pierre-Emile Højbjerg from Tottenham. That's been reported before. We'll see if it gets done. Arsenal ready to explore a move for Raheem Sterling should he become available. That's another domino of all of this now that you've added Haaland, who is expendable at City. And where do they go? Does Sterling become expendable? He's been linked with moves before. We'll see if it actually happens this time. Anything on the Twitch pitch we need to hit before we go?
Just a couple of things, and it goes back to our discussion about Pro in the first hour with Dylan. Sure. Coco, why shouldn't the refs? Why shouldn't they have to answer to the press, make them give explanations for their calls? Don't let Pro give sterilized answers.
They don't know their sports. Do we see NBA referees do it? If I'm wrong, tell me, but I don't think NBA referees do press conferences. No, I don't think NFL referees do press conferences.
No.
Umpires don't do press conferences, Jarrett, do they?
No, they occasionally release statements, though.
They
like
did
last
recently.
Week's.
Yeah.
Well, that was because it was an absolute abomination of officiating with the Madison Bumgarner thing. Like it was a childish embarrassment by that umpire.
Creepy.
It was he basically sat there and just honestly held his hand until Bumgarner, who already has a short fuse, snapped and gave him an excuse because the dude was on a power trip.
Yeah. He was insinuating that Bumgarner was using foreign substance and was checking his hand for foreign substance, but did it in a way that was very slow and deliberate that ticked Bumgarner off, and then he went off.
He knew exactly what he was doing, but he's on a power trip because he's an umpire, and his entire career has been built on this idea that has been supported by the actions that umpires are exempt from all this stuff. Whatever.
But they don't do press conferences after games to talk about.
They don't have to answer for their mistakes.
Which
like that.
Yeah, but which I get. Like, so to say that like Pro should make their referees do it, I'm fine with it, because I've seen some of the questions issued to referees in this from people who don't know the laws of the game, and it's a waste of time. I don't need it. I don't need that. I honestly don't need that. I don't need a referee hauled up before people who might not necessarily know what they're talking about to yell about a call or ask about a call when we're not getting anything out of it. I do need Pro to explain decisions and how decisions are made and why they're made in certain ways. I do need that to happen. Those explanations need to happen. That's more valuable to me than a press scrum after a game. I don't think that's valuable. So that's just my opinion on it. It doesn't need to be like, they don't need to be hauled up there. Like, you made a mistake, rabble. Like that, we get nothing out of that. We get no value out of that.
And Ricky, along those same lines, we're discussing the NBA. Ricky thinks the 2-minute report is a joke in the NBA.
Yeah. I like the idea of it. I don't like that it separates the 2 minutes from everything else. I don't like that, but I get I get it in a basketball game. I get it why you're doing it that way. I don't hate the idea of it. It doesn't really cross over to what we're doing here. I don't think you could do an equivalent of it that would make sense, because a penalty, it's just different the way things work. Like a penalty in the first 5 minutes is just as important as a penalty in the last 5 in a sport that, has lower scoring and has lower, deciding factors in it. So it wouldn't apply here, but I don't necessarily think something like that gets into ticky-tack kind of judgment things. Like, that's what I don't like about it. I don't think that helps. I expect a referee to miss some calls in a game. It's going to happen. I hope that they're not calls that decide the game. That's where you want to get to. And with VAR, that shouldn't happen unless somebody fails in their situation. Somebody fails in their job. If it is a decision at midfield on a bang bang play, if it's a foul or not, or a grab or whatever, I don't need that report. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need that report. And then in the 2-minute report, I guess I wish what the NBA would do rather than, well, they got this wrong, and this person was in the lane for 4 seconds as opposed to 3, and that should have been a foul. Like, I know it is. I don't need that level of detail. I don't know if it helps. I think what I need is decision or game-changing calls. And look, basketball, like, adds onto itself, so I don't know if you can really separate it the same way outside of, like, this player should have been ejected, this player wasn't ejected, that kind of stuff, or they were ejected wrongly. In soccer, I just need pro to address the game-changing incidents, and those are generally going to be under the purview of VAR. So where there's an issue, and they need to point out positive ones too. And they do, and I think at times they maybe lean to that too hard instead of addressing mistakes. But they need to point out where the system works too for people to understand it. But they need to do it. They have to do it consistently, and I just don't think they do it consistently enough. And at times they try to bury stuff, which I really have an issue with.
Bernd, the issue is, who are you replacing suspended refs with if we go to that step? The referee.
I mean, you're going down in the pool. Like, that's what it is. And the pool is the pool. Like, you don't have some magic referee who's not working, who is the greatest thing ever. You're going to somebody else who generally I would think is somebody who is less proven, but has potential. And they have to get an opportunity somehow. So, I mean, that is what it is. That's the same in any situation. If you have a player who's not playing well and you replace them with somebody else, you're not replacing them with a like-for-like player. Like, generally, that's just not going to be the case. So that's life. I mean, the flip side of saying you can't replace them because you don't have a referee who's as good on the other side of it or has proven themselves as much, that doesn't work either. You know what I mean? So you got to do something. And I think they are doing something, but they're not clear in what they're doing. And they need to be. If Marufo was taken off of a game because of the incident in Fort Lauderdale, announce it. Say that's what it is. Say he's not working as a referee this week. He's going to be a VAR instead. You don't have to say we also slapped him on the wrist 5 times. You know, we took away his gas money. Like, we don't need that. We don't need that. Just, he's not working this week because he made a big mistake. Okay. Somebody else is working. They've got a pool they've got a rotation of referees who are regularly working the league that they can do that with. They're not running out of people. But the further down in the pool you go, the less proven they are. That's just life. And it opens a door. And sometimes that might open a door for a good referee who hasn't really gotten an opportunity on a consistent basis, and they do a game and you're like, wow, they handled that really well. We need to see them more. And it can change the way the pool works.
Yeah. Bernd continued. He said the refereeing in the lower divisions is actually worse relative to the level of play than in MLS, and the NWSL is a whole different level of bad. The foul by Stab on Carolyn was a criminal offense. Unbelievable, really.
Yeah. The NWSL's separate, kind of, because it's a little bit more of a different pool, although there is some crossover. So I'm going to leave that to the side because that's a little more complicated. I think it is definitely a pool issue there, and you're about to add another professional league with the USL Super League, and you're going to have to add more professional referees to work women's games. It doesn't have to be women necessarily, but you're going to have to add more referees there, and preferably I would like to see more female referees, just in general, not only to work the women's leagues. Tori Penso does a great job. She can work whatever she wants to work, wherever she gets booked, wherever she wants to be booked. The lower divisions, I think the biggest difference, honestly, is the not having VAR. I really think that's the biggest difference in, like, the feel a little bit. You have a bigger drop-off from referees who work MLS to USL Championship than you do in play, but you do have a big drop-off in play too. But the biggest difference is in some of those game-changing situations, whether it's a red, whether it's a penalty, that you don't have the VAR backup, and maybe it gets exposed a little bit more, that drop off, rather than having more support. That's something to me that there is not an excuse for not using VAR, because you're televising all of the games. You're doing them from a central location. There's no reason not to have some form of VAR in the USL Championship and, frankly, USL League One, because it's the same kind of setup. You might not have as many cameras. You might not have as many opportunities, but you got a replay button. You got a rewind button. And you can give some help to referees who need it. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that. And NWSL is the same thing. You've got that too. So VAR is needed in the lower divisions, and you have the mechanisms to do it. It just might not be quite as thorough as the MLS level of VAR. That's okay. It's still useful.
In our television discussion that we had.
Yeah, last two.
Okay,
sorry, I got to get moving.
All right. I'll go one on the TV discussion and then one on Atlanta United.
Okay.
Burned about the TV discussion. I always wonder whether the fact that MLS went to ESPN Plus the same year as ESPN Plus also signed the Bundesliga and La Liga hasn't hurt MLS a lot more than they thought as compared to when they had their own streaming platform. Seems the timing was unfortunate on that one for MLS.
I thoroughly and utterly disagree with you, Burned, because I don't think it matters about how many people are watching on ESPN Plus versus MLS and Bundesliga. It matters you're in a place that people are maybe coming there for the Bundesliga or for La Liga or for whatever else, and then saying, oh, I got MLS too. Cool. I'm going to watch MLS. It's when you get into the streaming world, it's not about ratings in the same way. It's about accessibility, and it's about, is this a destination for people? And ESPN Plus is a massive destination for people, not even just from a soccer perspective. So it's a different paradigm, and that's something I think we have to get our heads around in the way we talk about ratings and all of it. It's not purely viewers anymore. It is accessibility. It is reach. It is social media reach. It is short-term views versus long-term views versus the 15-minute replays of games versus the 2-minute ones that are on social media and then on TikTok and then on Instagram and all of it. It's just the paradigm is completely shifted. But talking about what streaming partner you're going to be on, it's like being on SiriusXM. You know, they don't do ratings the same way. They have stuff internally, but it's not really the point. For MLS to be on ESPN Plus, it's about how many overall subscribers does ESPN Plus have, not how many people are watching each individual game and what that means. And ESPN Plus has been one of the most successful streaming rollouts. So having it internal on like the MLS website, like they used to do, versus being on ESPN Plus, it is an absolute no-brainer to be on ESPN Plus. Complete no-brainer. And it's much better for the league to be there. And deciding what's next, is it ESPN Plus, or does somebody else who maybe doesn't have quite as much reach, but throws a whole lot more money at you, like an Apple TV, which has a lot of reach, or a Bleacher Report,
Prime.
You know, I don't think Prime's in the mix, John. I think we're down to Discovery, Apple, and ESPN as part of it. I don't think Amazon has been reported as being in the mix. So I don't want to confuse people. Right. There's one of the others that is trying to grow, throw more money at it. And you go back to a wrestling conversation. It's like WWE being on Peacock, you know, having their own, and actually this is a really good simile. They had their own thing on their own website with their own app with the WWE network, and they did pretty well. They got subscribers, and they kind of changed the paradigm for how people consume their product. But then it made more sense for them to be on a Peacock service where they're a part of the service and have more eyeballs potentially coming to them that way, as opposed to doing it themselves. I think MLS is the same thing.
Yeah, and not shouldering as much of it financially as they were when they were on their own as the WWE network too.
Yeah, I wonder about that. It's not so much shouldering financial, it's getting paid to be there. So, I mean, they're still producing it. I don't think Peacock is like paying to produce things,
No.
but Peacock paid to have the product on their product.
Right.
So that's not exactly the same thing.
Then the Atlanta United question, one thing that just popped into the inbox. Shiva, in discussing the first goal from Atlanta United, realistically, how many of those 11 pass goals can we see?
You can't think of it that way, Shiva. Like, you just can't. You can't get that detailed. Like, if it's a 9-pass goal, it's not as good as an 11-pass goal, or if it's a 15-pass goal, it's better. Like, you can't go to that. It doesn't. In general, combined passing goals, you can expect to see them. There's no reason why you can't. But it doesn't matter how many. It doesn't mean that 7's worse than 11 here at all. Like, it doesn't matter. The ball ends up in the back of the net, and it's through possession. I know, bad word. You can find those goals, and you can expect to see those goals every game. And they've had the opportunities to score those goals every game. They just didn't score the goal, period, before. This time they did. So they can expect to score goals in that way. Absolutely they can. If they can't, then somebody tell Pep, because he's been doing it wrong for a long time. You tell Klopp, too, because he's added that element to Liverpool's game. Warn him that he can't do it. Tell Pochettino that they can't pass to create those goals. Tell Nagelsmann, because he's added those elements too. Like, yeah, you can absolutely expect it, and you should expect it. There should not be a worry that you can't expect it. Like that, you can't expect 4 goals a game in general, because that's not realistic in any team that it plays in a competitive league that is actually being pushed by the opponents on a regular basis. But can you expect goals in that manner? Yeah, and you should. And we see it all the time all around the world.
And then the one thing in the inbox that just popped in, Everton heading back to the USA this summer, playing Arsenal in Baltimore on July 16th and playing Minnesota United at Allianz in Minneapolis on July 20.
Everton and Minnesota in St. Paul. Interesting.
Former Toffee Adrian Heath.
Well, yes, of course. Is he still the manager by that point, Jarrett?
I think Jarrett departed.
I wanted Jarrett to answer that. He's left. We'll see. That's going to do it for us. Got to get things together. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. And it'll be an Open Cup match day for Atlanta United and Nashville. And I'm just so curious as to what the vibe's going to be like at Geodis Park. I'm looking forward to seeing Geodis Park, but I hope it is a full or mostly full Geodis Park and a loud one, but that gets really quiet as the day goes on. That's what I'm hoping for. So we will see. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Mucho Platio.
Mucho Platio.